Welcome to the official inauguration of the new UNESCO Chair of Interpretation and Education for the Promotion of Integrated Heritage Approaches. Lepo pozdravljam med nami rektorico Univerze na Primorskem, profesorico Klavdijo Kutnar, gospo ministrico za izobraževanje, znanost in šport, gospo Simono Kustec in predstavnika UNESCO Slovenije, generalnega sekretarja, gospoda Gašperja Hrastelja. Dediščina je vse okoli nas, v grajenem in naravnem okolju, v njunem prepletu, v nesnovnih razsežnostih, predvsem je dediščina odsev in izraz stalno spreminjajočih se vrednot družbe. Zato je gradnik identitete, hkrati pa jih izhodišče razvoja. Da bi bil ta skladen in trajnosten, mora odnos do dediščine biti celosten in vključujoč. Temeljiti mora torej na znanju in vključujoči komunikaciji. To sta področji, katerima se posveča nova UNESCO Katedra, ustanovljena na naši univerzi. V sodelovanju s Parkom Škocjanske jame, prvo slovensko lokacijo na seznamu svetovne dediščine pod okriljem UNESCO. Il patrimonio si trova tutto intorno a noi, nell'ambiente costruito come in quello naturale, nella loro interazione, nella dimensione immateriali. In primo luogo, tuttavia, il patrimonio è il riflesso e l'espressione dei valori della società che sono in continua trasformazione. Pertanto, il patrimonio è un elemento costitutivo dell'identità e allo stesso tempo punto di partenza dello sviluppo. Heritage is all around us, in the built and in the natural environment, in their intertwining in its immaterial dimensions. Most of all, heritage is a reflection and expression of their constantly evolving values of society. Heritage is therefore a constituent element of identity, and at the same time, the starting point of development. For this to be coherent and sustainable, the approach towards heritage must be integrated and inclusive. It must therefore be based on knowledge and inclusive communication. These are the areas addressed by the new UNESCO Chair established at our university together with Škocjan Caves Park, the first Slovenian site inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Zdaj pa dovolite, da začnemo s pozdravnimi nagovori. Najprej bi predala besedo rektorici Univerze na Primorskem, profesor Klavdiji Kutnar, za uvodno misel. Cedo ora la parola alla rettrice dell'Università del Litorali, la dottoressa Klavdija Kutnar. We now invite Rector of the University of Primorska, Professor Klavdija Kutnar, to take the work, please.
Hvala lepa. Dobrodošli na Univerzi na Primorskem, spoštovana ministrica, v veliko čast nam je, da ste za svojo udeležbo naš slavnostni dogodek, uvodni dogodek UNESCO Katedre čestili z osebnim udeležbo tu. Zdaj bom pa prišla na angleščino. Edward O. Wilson was a pioneer of evolutionary biology and a long-time Harvard professor. One of his famous quotes goes like this: "The real problem of humanity is the following. We have paralytic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And this is terrifically dangerous, and it is now approaching a point of crisis overall." A very insightful description of today's rapidly changing world. It looks to me that we are indeed at crossroads. A crossroads holding certain paradoxical attributes. First, Due to consequences of a highly advanced technological society, our environment is changing faster than our genes can readjust. We know that certain measures will have to be taken to rectify the situation, and yet we have become so technologically dependent that no solution without further technological advancements seems possible. This brings me to second point. It is parallel or consequential to the proud marching to the technological advances and prosperous future. But the very fabric of our Western civilization is being torn apart. For yesterday's virtues have become today's evil doings, and so heads are tiles and sinners saints. Somewhere along the way, we must have definitely made a new turn. So humanity has a problem. In Wilson's words, a real problem, or as mathematicians would put it, a well-defined problem. But this is good. Well-defined problems are certainly not bad per se, because only well-defined problems may be solved, and as such, worth being solved. As always, there are two paths that can be taken. We can either put all our hopes and expectations into believing that somewhere along the way there is a magical point of inflection and that somehow things will get right again on their own. Or we can start looking for our points of balance inside this difficult three-dimensional space of Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. True, we could just leave everything behind and simply go back to nature. This would be a mathematically correct solution, but a trivial one and thus not a substantial one. There is also a non-trivial solution, not an easy one, but one worth trying. We must opt and go for a reconstruction of our institutions so as to make them real facilitators of the lost communication between the all-encompassing technology and the essence of our being. Our tradition, our roots, everything that we hold dear to our hearts, everything that defines us as human beings needs to be preserved. Then the technology will soften along and the difficult three-dimensional space will not be as difficult to live in anymore. I see today's meeting of the UNESCO Chair for Interpretation and Education for Enhancing Integrated Heritage Approaches here at our university, a small but very important step in precisely this direction. Thank you. Welcome to our university again.
Hvala lepa rektorici za njene uvodne misli in spodbudne besede. Thank you very much to the rector of the University of Primorska, professor Klavdija Kutnar. Nova katedra je nastala v tesnem sodelovanju s Slovensko nacionalno komisijo UNESCO in torej odgovornega, se pravi Ministrstvo za izobraževanje, znanost in šport, vabim k besedi sedaj našo ministrico, profesor Simono Kustec. La cattedra nasce da un'intensa collaborazione con la Commissione Nazionale Slovena per l'UNESCO e quindi con il Ministero. Invito quindi il Ministro per l'Educazione, la Scienza e lo Sport della Repubblica di Slovenia a prendere la parola. The new chair has been established in close collaboration with the Slovene National Committee for UNESCO in the Ministry of Charge, so I would like to invite the Minister for Education, Science and Sports of the Republic of Slovenia, Professor Simona Kustec, to take the floor.
Najlepša hvala, grazie mille. Thank you very much for the welcome words. Respectful rector of the University of Primorska, respectful dean of the new chair, and of the Faculty of Humanities, respectful Director, UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe, Mrs. Luiza Massot Thompson Flores, dear Secretary General of the Slovenian National Commission for UNESCO, Mr. Hrastelj, respectful guests, participants, and collaborators. I would like to say that having a new chair of that kind, a new UNESCO chair, is a very big event, not only of today, but also for the future. For all of you, and as well for all of us. That means also for our small country, for Slovenia. You are actually challenging the boundaries of modern research and also educational work of the future, with the approach that is very inclusive and very integral, something that is definitely representing a formula of the future success for challenging, for bright, for innovative, for brave research and educational work. If we want to be good, if we want to be the best, we need to collaborate. We need to find each other and we need to work together. And exactly this is the result of the approach that you undertook with the creation of the new UNESCO Chair of Interpretation and Education for Enhancing Integrated Heritage Approaches. Speaking about the UNESCO Chair, you know that there are many of them around the world, 850 in 117 countries. And we here in Slovenia are only one of them, and the one with 4 UNESCO chairs. And it is really a big success, and also devotion that we managed to get this highly representation in the framework of UNESCO for another chair. It is also the representation of the excellent work and ideas, braveness that our people are showing through their work, through their ideas, and with this approach of inviting everybody into this same and common approach that is representing the care and the strive for the integration of various types of heritages, especially natural and cultural one, through scientific work, through educational work, through the university work, and especially also through the invitation of the other stakeholders from the communities. And here I'm especially speaking also about the collaboration with the companies, with the business, and being aware of the fact that we are doing this with the same aim, with the same and common goal, that is the representation and the care for the nature, for the culture, and for the human beings. This is the best and the highest responsible thing that we can do and give to our people and to our nature and to our history and to our heritage. And I'm really very, very proud that we are holding exactly this chair here in Slovenia, showing that even though we are small by size, we are big by the ideas, by the braveness of the approach, by the knowledge that we can offer and share with the whole world. I wish you all the best. Stay brave and a lot of successes, undoubtedly, with the work in the framework of the new chair, the new UNESCO chair, and of course with our world global attitude and commitment to the heritage and the safeguarding of the heritage of the culture, nature, and our civilization. Congratulations and all my best.
Hvala lepa ministrici za pozdravne besede in tudi za podporo. Ringrazio la signora Ministro Simona Kustec. I thank the Minister for her greeting and words of support. Veselje nam je, da je z nami danes tudi gospa Luiza Massot Thompson Flores, direktorica UNESCO-ve regionalne pisarne za znanost in kulturo v Evropi s sedežem v Benetkah, ki se nam pridružuje preko spleta. È un onore avere con noi oggi anche la signora Luiza Massot Thompson Flores, direttrice dell'Ufficio regionale UNESCO per la scienza e la cultura in Europa, con sede a Venezia, che ci si unisce virtualmente. Signora Thompson Flores, benvenuti, buongiorno.
Buongiorno, spero che tutti riescono a sentirmi.
Sì? Sì.
Adesso sono dei problemi con il microfono, quindi mi scusi. E un altro buongiorno a tutti. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate today. So I'd like to begin with excellencies, colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is, as I said, a great pleasure for me to participate in the inauguration of the UNESCO Chair of Interpretation and Education for Enhancing Integrated Heritage Approaches at the University of Primorskem. I would like to start by thanking Professor Lazar for inviting me to intervene on this momentous occasion. I also wish to salute the representatives of the Slovenian National Commission for UNESCO, the Ministry of Culture and the Ministry, and all other distinguished speakers and participants today. The launch of this new chair confirms that heritage interpretation and education is becoming increasingly relevant alongside the growing awareness of the cross-cutting contribution that heritage sector can make to society. It has been widely recognized that heritage conservation cannot be achieved by merely preserving physical attributes. As specified in 2015, policy for the integration of a sustainable development perspective into the processes of the World Heritage Convention. In the current context of changing demographics and climate, growing inequalities, diminishing resources, and growing threats to heritage, the need has become apparent to view conservation objectives within a broader range of economic, social, and environmental values and needs encompassed in a sustainable development concept. Policies, both at regional and national level, increasingly integrate heritage conservation and management in many cross-cutting areas such as poverty reduction and employment, peace and reconciliation, social inclusion, well-being, climate change, disaster risk management, and responses to emergency, to just name a few. Nevertheless, fulfilling all of these comprehensive demands placed on the heritage sector is not an easy task. It is therefore crucial to employ integrated, multidisciplinary approaches to bringing our ambitious visions down to earth. In this context, heritage interpretation and education form an integral part of the solution. Heritage interpretation as a structured approach to non-formal education that focuses on communicating significant ideas about a place to people, plays a unique role in fostering a thorough, shared understanding of the heritage within its economic, social, and environmental dynamics among all stakeholders, thereby laying the groundwork for an effective and inclusive heritage management system. With this approach, UNESCO, in cooperation with public and private partners, endeavors to lead and foster pioneer actions in the framework of cultural and interdisciplinary activities of our UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe. The topic of heritage interpretation and education has been explored on several different occasions. For instance, in 2018, the topic was identified as a major primary purpose of the visitor centers in the UNESCO designated sites during our first regional workshop for such centers in Europe. The third regional workshop of the same series, held in 2019, highlighted the importance of transmitting universal values, including sustainable development and peacekeeping, through interpretation and education. We made groundbreaking progress in this field last year when we launched a novel capacity-building initiative aimed at advancing interpretive planning at World Heritage properties in Europe. A pilot course was successfully organized in cooperation with the European Association for Heritage Interpretation and other experts in world heritage. I will not disclose further details on this initiative and this activity, as Matteo Rosati, presently acting officer in charge of our cultural unit of the Regional Bureau, will shed highlights on these activities, and I envy him because he is there in presence with me. I am convinced that launching the UNESCO Chair in Interpretation and Education for enhancing the integrated heritage approaches will be another important stepping stone in bridging knowledge gaps and building networks to advance our shared commitment to sustainable heritage. With this in mind, I wish you continued success with your fine work and look forward to opportunities for our cooperation with the Chair and the Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Massot, for your words of support. Ringrazio la signora Massot per le sue parole di saluto e di sostegno. Zdaj pa bi želela seveda predati besedo predstavniku Slovenske nacionalne komisije za UNESCO, generalnemu sekretarju, gospodu Gašperju Hrastlju, ki je odigral pomembno vlogo v procesu prijave naše katedre. Cedo ora la parola al signor Gašper Hrastelj del Comitato Nazionale Sloveno per l'UNESCO, che ha svolto un ruolo fondamentalmente nel processo dell'applicazione della nostra cattedra. I would like to give the word to Mr. Gašper Hrastelj from the Slovene National Committee for UNESCO, who has been a central figure in the process of application of our UNESCO Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. Spoštovana ministrica, spoštovana rektorica, spoštovana dekanja. Dear Anna Luisa, I'm happy also that you are connected with us. Dear ladies and gentlemen, also Matteo from the UNESCO Venice office, I'm really happy to be with you. It's the first time, as our minister already explained, the UNESCO UNITWIN and UNESCO Chair network. It's a network of more than 850 UNESCO chairs all over the world. It's the biggest and largest inter-university network in order to build bridges, to build cooperation among institutions in the field of higher education, in the field of research. And it's a great network existing already since 1992. It's the first time, and as our minister also confirmed, in Slovenia we already have 4 UNESCO chairs in the field of custology, in the field of open education, in the field of water disaster risk management, and now in the field of World Heritage interpretation. And it's the first time that we receive such a support in an inaugurational event also from political decision makers. That makes me happy. Also that the UNESCO Regional Office in Venice is with us. And as far as I am informed, also at least 2 or 3 colleagues from the UNESCO Secretariat are online with us during today's program. As I said, one of the largest networking program in the field of university collaboration. Usually, UNESCO chairs are established in fields where lacking expertise is recognized, is identified. And so, because UNESCO chairs, they do not work locally, nationally. They have to work globally, not only in the region, but they are also, I can say, probably think tanks or bridge builders, also in the field of North-South cooperation. So this is what the Slovenian National Commission also, of course, intends to support. And as the Dean of the faculty said already, we were with you and all colleagues from the very beginning when you started to draft the proposal for UNESCO, which then took a few years, unfortunately, also due to COVID restrictions, so that it has been finally signed, the agreement, in autumn last year. And now we are really proud of this new UNESCO chair, because we can already this year, in a few weeks and months' time, we can see also the first, steps and milestones of work of this chair, because Matteo Rosati from the UNESCO Venice office will talk about that later. I suppose the UNESCO Venice office is intending to possibly organize a regional or even international workshop for World Heritage Site managers, possibly and hopefully in Slovenia in autumn this year or after the summertime this year. Which could be a big opportunity also to collaborate with the new UNESCO chair and of course with other UNESCO designations in Slovenia. So also on behalf of the Slovenian National Commission for UNESCO, I wish you all success for your work. Since I know you for more than 5 years now, I'm convinced that this story will be a big success. So thank you very much for your attention and all my best wishes. Thank you.
Nacionalne komisije UNESCO. Thank you very much to Gašper Hrastelj. To conclude this introductory part of our meeting, I would like, as a dean and as a head of this UNESCO chair, say a few words about the basic topics of our newly established UNESCO chair. The chair aims to fill the gap within the existing UNESCO chairs in the world, as it identifies in the interpretation and the education through an integrated approach to heritage, the key sustainable heritage management. Trends in scholarship, in practice, pinpoint the need for an inclusive approach in the management of cultural and natural heritage. The main concept in this sense consists in the participatory and values-led approaches that aim at promoting sustainable management of both natural and cultural heritage through community involvement. Deriving from the different discourses addressed by the faculty research and Park Škocjanske jame activities, the chair, as the core of the international network for joint research project and as an educational platform, will seek to develop approaches and skills for heritage interpretation and education in an integrative perspective, and thus bridge the artificial divides within heritage. With an innovative way of education, the chair aims at overcoming the stereotypical divisions between nature and culture, nations and ethnicities, professional sectors dealing with heritage, etc., and promotes inclusion, cooperation, awareness, empathy, and peace. The main goal is to develop interpretation and education for professionals and the general public in the context of an integrated approach to heritage. The main institutions of the UNESCO Chair, Faculty of Humanities and Škocjan Caves Park, complement each other with their rich experience in connecting different heritage issues and approaches. Faculty with an interdisciplinary approach to different heritage discourses, and Park Škocjanske jame with broad experience in the management of heritage and natural sites through the involvement of various stakeholders and communities. Both institutions are committed to overcoming the division between natural and cultural heritage. With the chair, faculty acts as the educational institution on the field of heritage with interdisciplinary integration of archaeology, art history, anthropology, history, conservation, museology, heritage tourism, intercultural studies, etc., while Park Škocjanske jame is the specialized and non-formal education of the general public through the frameworks of UNESCO, MAP, Ramsar, etc. The specific objectives of the chair are to develop forms of interpretation that go beyond stereotypical divisions, to promote new approaches in the management and preservation of heritage, to actively participate in the implementation and definition of new guidelines and policies in the field of heritage conservation, protection, and monitoring, to promote knowledge transfer through international and cross-border applicative and research projects. Thank you very much. Hvala lepa vsem prisotnim. S tem bi naš uvodni del zaključili. Govorniki se bomo umaknili za izjave medijev. Pridajam besedo kolegici Neži Čebron Lipovec. I will now pass the work to my colleague Neža Čebron Lipovec, who will moderate the second part of our program. Thank you very much again.
Najlepša hvala dekani, grazie alla preside, and thanks very much to the dean for this introductory part. Considering, we'll take just one moment. Torej. Upoštevajoč da so glavni cilji naše katedre izobraževanje in interpretacija, smo zelo veseli, da danes gostimo gospoda Matteo Rosatija iz UNESCOve regionalne pisarne za znanost in kulturo v Evropi, ki bo predstavil UNESCOve regionalne dejavnosti na področju interpretacije svetovne dediščine. Considerando che l'obiettivo principale della nostra cattedra tratta appunto l'educazione e l'interpretazione, siamo molto lieti di ospitare oggi tra noi il signor Matteo Rosati dell'Ufficio regionale UNESCO per la scienza e la cultura in Europa, che presenterà le attività regionali sul campo dell'interpretazione del patrimonio mondiale. So, taking into account that the main aim of our chair is to develop activities in the field of education and heritage interpretation, we are really glad to greet today among us Mr. Matteo Rosati from the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe, who will present the UNESCO regional activities in the field of interpretation of world heritage. Mr. Rosati, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your excellent Italian makes me feel very close to home, which in fact I am. So and if our director is still connected, I will confirm that she indeed is missing a very distinguished company, a beautiful venue, and a very warm, sunny day here in Koper. So I thank all the previous speakers, the distinguished minister and the rector and the dean and our longtime friend Gašper and Špela from the Ministry of Culture for their introductions, and of course for the invitation, which comes very timely because indeed we are now stepping up our activities on this subject, and we really look forward to investigating opportunities for cooperation with this newly established chair on a subject of growing interest and relevance. Let's start from something I have mentioned during my short intervention on the occasion of your online meeting to announce the chair. And this means taking a step back to the basic concept of world heritage, the so-called outstanding universal value. Now, this is defined as the cultural and or natural significance of a place which is so exceptional as to transcend national boundaries and to be of common importance to present and future generations and to whole humanity. So although embodied by tangible and intangible attributes of a place, this value, as all values, is a social construct, expressing the degree of importance that we attach to such a place. And this value is formally expressed through acts that express ideas or opinions in the form of official statements, the so-called statement of outstanding universal value, statement of integrity, statement of authenticity when it comes to cultural heritage. So we may therefore convene that the entire World Heritage system evolves around acts of interpretation. One more background element. We shall keep in mind that the World Heritage Convention is to be intended as an integral part of UNESCO's overarching mandate to foster equitable, sustainable development and to promote peace and security, which in these very days, even in Europe, sounds again so cogent and impelling. Accordingly, the protection of the outstanding universal value is not just an end in itself, but it's also a means to achieve higher objectives related to the well-being of present and future generations, which are aligned with the fundamental values lying at the core of UNESCO. Now, bearing in mind these two basic assumptions, let's now look at the World Heritage rules of the game. Now, on the one hand, we have presentation of heritage as one of the main duties that state parties shall commit to, and is present in many articles of the Convention, as well as, of course, in many paragraphs of the operational guidelines. This is clearly stated in Article 5, for example. But presentation is a one-way process. Presentation is about telling others what this heritage is about and what the values are according to those who define the statements. On the other hand, the World Heritage System is increasingly recognizing the importance of participation to achieve inclusive, dynamic, and representative heritage governance and management systems. And this is also more and more present, especially in the operational guidelines and in other very important documents I want to mention. One especially, which is the 2015 policy for the integration of a sustainable development perspective into the World Heritage processes. Now, the combination of presentation and participation produces something that is pretty close to what we intend by heritage interpretation, which is why we, in the Regional Bureau, UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe, decided progressively to focus on this subject with a field-oriented approach, being a field office, meaning with a focus on how to support the integration of heritage interpretation into site management processes in World Heritage sites by means of raising awareness and developing skills and competencies of relevant actors, starting with the site managers. Now, this was mentioned by our director, started working on this subject actually within the framework of a different initiative, which is still ongoing, on the role of visitor centers and heritage centers in UNESCO designated sites, not only World Heritage, but also biosphere reserves and geoparks. And one of the core functions of these centers that was defined together with our participants already during the first meeting in 2018 is interpretation of heritage, together with acting, of course, as an actor that facilitate the management of tourism flows, and a platform for community engagement. But heritage interpretation was really the core business of this kind of centers. And so we started working together with Interpret Europe, which is the largest, perhaps, association in Europe of heritage interpreters, on a specific training component for managers of visitor centers that we organized in Bamberg in Germany back in 2019. This confirmed the relevance of this subject, and we decided to take one step further and develop a specific course targeting World Heritage Site managers. So we have continued working. If I just can, next slide, I don't know. The pointer seems to have some problem, it's stuck. Well, I can speak without the visual aid. Okay, it works, good. So we decided to take this step further and develop this as a training, a pilot training course. It is an experiment. It is a learning experience even for ourselves to see how taking what is already, let's say, well tested and developed in the field of heritage interpretation and bringing it, integrating it into the processes of site management in World Heritage Sites. The World Heritage Regional Course on Interpretative Planning, which we called shortly WINTERP, assumes that heritage interpretation, intended as a structured approach to non-formal learning specialized in communicating significant ideas about a place to people, can contribute significantly to communicating, promoting, and possibly upholding the values and objectives of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was recalled as well in basically all the previous interventions. Furthermore, on the other hand, we believe that bringing a sustainable development perspective to the practice of heritage interpretation in all areas, planning, content development, implementation, will enrich heritage interpretation, allowing greater results for both heritage and society. So, together with very experienced and highly competent trainers from Interpret Europe, we have developed a pilot training component that evolves around what we called value-based interpretation, meaning working on how interpretation can and shall be hinged on the different value levels that underlie a heritage place, starting but not limited to the outstanding universal value. The outstanding universal value is something very specific relating to a very specific and well precisely confined and boundaried place, which is itself embedded into a broader network and context with other heritage values, tangible and intangible, which in itself is embedded into a social, environmental, cultural, economic context with other values again, which is of course encompassed by this broader perspective of the sustainable development approach and the peace-building values. So the training subjects that we have included in this training experience were aimed, first of all, at developing an understanding of the subject with regard to the site managers, to the direct beneficiaries, awareness and understanding of the subject and the techniques behind heritage interpretation, with a special focus on planning, meaning planning for interpretation, not acting directly as heritage interpreters, but how to plan for better heritage interpretation and how to integrate it into the site management practices so that interpretation is not perceived as a standalone, isolated, parallel dynamic, but really integrated into the concept and the plans that concern management, because it's functional to the achievement of the same objectives. And then the course was, of course, about defining heritage, helping our participants in the definition of heritage phenomena, the analysis of the interpretative services proposals concerning how to improve them, how to reinforce local engagement, how to propose evaluation methods that can then provide feedback to improve the heritage interpretation planning system, and so forth. The pilot course was divided, and this was also innovative from our side, at least into 3 different steps, because we didn't want to limit this experience to developing skills and awareness and knowledge of our direct participants. We wanted to see how far we could go in bringing results down to the management level and making a change in the management systems. So we have, first of all, selected participants, and we were positively surprised when we received more than 110 applications to a call on something that was new and, pilot and a bit low profile. We selected 25 participants because we couldn't afford to have more, otherwise the training experience would have been diluted. We proposed a first training component that was online and partly self-paced and partly based on online workshops to introduce to the subject and to prepare for a 5-day on-site intensive workshop that we held in Kotor, hosted by the city of Kotor and the authorities of Montenegro. And after that, we had the third phase, during which the participants were offered the opportunity to build on the learnings acquired during the previous 2 phases and outline a heritage interpretation plan for their own sites. And some of them, they went even further. They then became members of Interpret Europe, and they are now working to really make it work, to create the resources, to create the conditions for implementing these new heritage interpretation plans. The feedback that we received from participants, I won't read them out, but basically confirmed that our original intuition was right. This is a very relevant and cogent line of work, which bridges an evident awareness and training gap. And you can see some quotes, I will leave the presentation with you, from the final evaluation by the participants that reflect all this. So for these reasons, we decided to continue this initiative and turn it from a pilot into some more structured initiative and organize a second training course on which we are starting working these very days. We are now developing a new form of partnership with Interpret Europe, and by the way, I'm very happy to have today the managing director, Ms. Helena Vicic. And as this was mentioned by Gašper, I think it's no secret any longer, but we really hope that we can work together with Slovenia, with all relevant authorities, to have the second course in Slovenia sometime in late summer, early autumn. And we are, working to create the conditions now. And of course, I do hope that there will be opportunities to develop a closer participation, a closer cooperation with this newly established chair. So I think I have taken even too long time, and thank you very much for the attention. Thank you.
Najlepša hvala Matteo Rosatiju za to izčrpno predstavitev, ki tako jasno naglaša naše skupne teme, ki so hkrati tako relevantne na globalnem nivoju. So really many thanks to Mr. Matteo Rosati for this exhaustive presentation that so neatly highlights our common topics and our common challenges, which actually have a very clear also global dimension. And we definitely look forward to develop together further activities, since we are definitely walking in parallel paths that we hope and we work together for them to intersect as soon as possible with the case studies on which we are working, and shall be presented at the very end of today's meeting, when the program of our work will be introduced. V veselje mi je, da je danes z nami tudi Špela Španžel z Direktorata za kulturno dediščino Ministrstva za kulturo Republike Slovenije, ki je predstavnica osrednje točke oziroma focal point za UNESCO-vo konvencijo o svetovni dediščini in UNESCO-vo konvencijo o nesnovni dediščini, pa tudi članica Slovenske komisije za UNESCO. Predstavila bo UNESCO-ve konvencije o dediščini in izzive 21. stoletja. It is an honor to give the floor now to Ms. Špela Španžel from the Directorate for Cultural Heritage of the Ministry of Culture of Slovenia, but also and especially representative of the focal point of the UNESCO Convention on World Heritage and the UNESCO Convention for Intangible Cultural Heritage, and she is also a member of the Slovenian National Committee for UNESCO. Her presentation focuses on the UNESCO Conventions on Heritage and the challenges of the 21st century. Špela, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dear Excellencies, distinguished and very dear colleagues and friends, participants online, it's lovely to be here in person and to seeing those of you who are present in person. I will mostly share my thoughts or maybe develop some thoughts without the visual aid. Matteo did it perfectly. But I wanted to talk about cultural conventions that are obviously part of the international standard documents, but they are important for a multitude of reasons, not necessarily always the obvious ones. We also connect them to promotion, tourism, to forging political alliances, but we don't want to go there. I want to talk from my position of working in the administration, in a government office, very similar to our national agencies or institutions, that we do expert work, and rather than under the influence of daily politics, we would like to be creating policies, systemic approach to implementation, and creating ecosystem for cooperation with various stakeholders and at various levels. I will center my thoughts around the 1972 Convention, as we call it in the UNESCO circle. So it is the World Heritage Convention that is actually celebrating its 50th anniversary. And it's actually an illustration of the continuous relevance of the heritage, of the social construction, as Matteo said. It has been evolving over decades, and I will try to briefly go through the current issues that will also affect its future. I will also draw from recent experience with 3 World Heritage properties during the past decades in the category of cultural heritage. There are diverse properties, integrally connected to their surroundings, and therefore illustrate a dynamic relationship heritage plays in a wider spatial and community context. And I will be quite critical in saying that what is recognized as an added value and goes beyond a single domain actually presents a difficulty for the institutional framework and for respective authorities. I will not forget the Intangible Cultural Heritage, or ICH, the acronym that is known to all, mostly because of the link to communities and to ethical standards. This is something that we are learning so much from the ICH domain. Because communities are at the center of intangible cultural heritage. It is not the experts who decide what intangible cultural heritage under the 2003 convention is. And it also bridges domains from agriculture, environment, health, and this really shows that culture and society's relevance for contemporary life. So it is living heritage and has huge potential with education. In closing, I will try to say why UNESCO Chair is important and very much welcomed, where potential synergies and challenges to tackle together are in an endeavor to bridge the disciplines and domains, academic context being a very important part in these reflections. So if I try to say something about the 1972 convention, I would start by saying that most significant, even revolutionary feature is that links together in a single document the concepts of nature conservation and the preservation of cultural properties. The convention actually recognizes the way in which people interact with nature and the fundamental need to preserve the balance between the two. And today's discourse, if you follow the UNESCO discussions, is to find the balance between conservation and so-called development. What development is, of course, it is the detail that is the most difficult one and contested in many states parties. So the timeline of the convention speaks of the convention's development from the adoption to 1975 with 20 ratifications and actual entry into force, when also the list of World Heritage in danger and the World Heritage Fund were created. So we didn't start with the representativeness, but we started with the need to conserve endangered properties. Then the operational guidelines, already mentioned, were created in 1978, and the first 12 sites were inscribed on the World Heritage List. 30th anniversary of the convention and the World Heritage Center was established, and not only that, also a new category of cultural landscapes was created. So it was the first legal binding document that actually recognized cultural landscapes. You probably know the Florence Convention, the Council of Europe Convention that came only in 2000. So this was really far-reaching endeavor. And then the strategic objectives come, and they actually relate to some of the topics that we were already mentioning. The so-called 5 Cs, some of you know, it's about the credibility, conservation, capacity building, communication, and then communities that came in 2007. So you see that is the clear evolvement of how the heritage also evolved. 1,000 sites, this milestone we reached in 2014. So where we are with the Slovenian inscriptions, if I try to mirror some of the concepts that I mentioned. In Ik, small town on the marshes located on the outskirts of the capital Ljubljana, we have cultural layers that contain the remains of the pile-dwelling settlements safely hidden underground, in the mid of agricultural landscape, where only expert guides and technical gadgets can so far help this heritage come alive in the natural environment. Visitors can visit the archaeological evidence housed in several museums, but luckily now we have the opportunity with the new interpretation center. So a big step forward and a big opportunity also to develop interpretation in cooperation with the 6 Alpine countries that are part of this prehistoric heritage, and where this heritage is mostly conserved in lakes. So we have a sort of opportunity to tell the story. In Slovenia, it has been quite difficult again to reconcile 2 legal systems of protection, which should be obvious partners. So the natural and cultural heritage one. And the Landscape Park Ljubljansko-Barje acts as a public institution that is actually under the auspices of the Ministry of Environment. And it conserves cultural heritage primarily with measures for conserving natural values. So secondly, the 2 biggest mercury mines in the world tell the story of the mercury ore production, trade, and its contribution to the global economy, as well as the story of miners in the mining towns of Almaden in Spain and Idrija, Slovenia. Industrial heritage in the town of Idrija, with its system of shafts and pits hidden deep under the entrances from the surface, with connected buildings in the surface and evident machinery, rich movable heritage and important intangible features, still clearly testifies of the magnificent past. But what is interesting is that the town's character remains to be industrial and built upon the 500 years tradition of mining. Nonetheless, the current industry in the town and its surrounding is high-tech, yes, respectful of the achievement of the past. We have the public institution established by the government in 2018 in the absence of the legal successor, the mine that was liquidated at the time for the obvious reasons. So culture had to step in. The center carried out a huge investment supported from the EEA funds, which is also very known. And this is the renovation of a smelting plant complex, which now houses contemporary interactive exhibitions and acts as an original site telling the story of particular stage in ore production. So again, an important interpretation, achievement, and an open opportunity to work on. And last but not least, newly inscribed series of works of Jože Plečnik in Ljubljana that presents a highly contextual property that was recognized as an outstanding example of human-centered urban design in accordance with the profoundly humanistic vision of an architect who transformed a provincial town of the former empire into a symbolic national capital. The World Heritage Committee accepted the rationale for the selected public spaces, city squares, parks, streets, promenades, embankments, and bridges across the Ljubljanica River, and public institutions, the National Library, markets, funerary complex, and churches, which have been subtly integrated into the already existing urban, cultural, and natural contexts to create a new identity for the city and meet the needs of its residents. The inscription recognizes the systemic efforts of competent institutions, owners, and communities to protect Plečnik's heritage, while, and this is the however again in the UNESCO language, would be that the committee's recommendations regarding the heritage impact assessment of contemporary interventions into the heritage site, this is the challenge that we're facing now and for the future, will serve to inform the protection and management of the World Heritage property. So the reflection is in place this year about everything that was said. I think that even with briefly going through the concepts, it is very clear why this is an endeavor that really needs to reflect about the lessons learned in the past decade and to discuss the future steps to be taken at national level, taking into account the World Heritage context and linking it with additional important anniversary, among other the Plečnik year that we are celebrating this year. I want to mention something about the convention today, and I hope it will be interesting enough also to the listeners. I want to name two of the very important issues that vivid discussions are ongoing, and by doing so, I want to start by naming the so-called global strategy for a representative, balanced, and credible World Heritage List that was adopted in 1994. That actually marks progression from a monumental vision of heritage to a much more people-oriented, multifunctional, and global vision of world heritage. Of course, it has historic backgrounds and consequences. We know why the list looks as it does today, and what are the actions to remedy that, if I may use this word. I want to briefly mention the reform of the nominations system that was introduced after a thorough expert consideration and consultation with the states parties. It is going to be a two-step formal procedure, and it was already confirmed by the committee, but now the harsh reality strikes because we are talking about the financial implications. So this is where we are at now. And it seems that without the active, also voluntary contributions from the state parties, this won't be possible the way it was designed. And what was the background, and this is the more dark side of the whole World Heritage system, we talk about deviations from expert recommendations. Because the World Heritage Committee as intergovernmental body, of course, takes sovereign decisions. Advisory bodies serve as non-obligatory advice-given bodies, so they give recommendation. World Heritage Center is the secretariat of the convention, and they are to support the state parties. The state parties that are not members of the committee, we are of course in our role as observers, so it's quite important to find our voices and to do so through cooperation. Again, the key concepts are conservation and capacity building, to be able to afford dialogue and guidance upstream as key objective. And I want to briefly mention another topic that I think will be potentially interesting also for the new chair, and is the reflection on sites associated with memories of recent conflicts and other negative and divisive memories. This is the official language. So in view of the increasing number of nominations submitted or under preparations related to sites associated with memories of recent conflict, the World Heritage Committee in 2018, in its decision, requested to undertake a comprehensive reflection, convene an expert meeting supported by expert studies, and actually adjourned consideration of a nomination that was presented by Belgium and France, and it was World War I. So the aim was to allow for both philosophical and practical reflection on the nature of memorialization and the value of evolving memories. So the interrelationship between material and immaterial attributes in relation to memory. So you see that we are moving away from the physical location. We are exactly in this process of talking and of developing guidance on whether or how these sites might relate to the purpose and scope of the World Heritage Convention. One could say that we are creating a new category. Of course, it has some consequences for the whole World Heritage system. And interest of the state parties to the convention is quite enormous, I would say. There are nominations on hold, France, landing beaches in Normandy, Romania with Brancusi Monumental Ensemble. There are entries on tentative lists that are as recent as the genocide in Rwanda. So there is now an open-ended working group, and there is a growing consensus to achieve so-called no blanket ban. So there is no restriction without exception, and all the nominations supposedly merit consideration case by case. We will see how the committee decision in June will go. I'm aware of the time, and I'll just stop here with naming, I think, what is one of the defining issues of our time. And of course, I want to talk about climate change. There are over 30 UNESCO programs in the sciences, education, culture, and communication that contribute to creating knowledge, education, and communicating about climate change, and to understanding the ethical implications for present and future generations. It is quite clear that both World Heritage and intangible heritage are heavily affected by the impacts of climate change. We have many findings from scientific bodies. ICOMOS at IUCN have shown that changing climate has quickly become one of the most important factors in causing irreparable and far-reaching damage to heritage. And IUCN estimates that it is the most important factor, threatening 1/3 of all heritage sites, including large ecosystems. So this is something that we need to focus our efforts at, because everyone is affected. It is only the scale of impact that is probably debatable. So I will stop with concluding my short speech in saying that, in my opinion, UNESCO experience can lead the way and stand as an example for setting priorities and actions to benefit heritage and beyond. Dare I say, to contribute to the well-being of society at large. Both good and challenging examples from Slovenia show us that we can benefit from tackling such complex and interconnected issues with the necessary attention, with inclusive, trans-sectoral and multi-level approach, even if it's very demanding, and it is indeed very demanding. As the contemporary challenges placed upon heritage conservation prove, Slovenia is not exempt from the global situation and should continue to benefit from the international community. Cultural heritage is a value per se, but then again, the safeguarding of its material carrier or the intangible set of knowledge, skills, expression is often not a straightforward and secluded endeavor. Right the contrary, it implies gradual steps forward, learning much along the way, improving ourselves at different levels, opening up to new ideas, exchanging information with partners, performing our daily work with professional ethics, and so on and so on. And this is precisely where I see the new UNESCO Chair, contributing knowledge and experience, investing in targeted research, and thus bridging the unnecessary gaps between culture, nature, education, and research sectors, translating different vocabularies to ease the dialogue and exchange of thoughts about the core issues we all share, to be even more precise. If our focus in the last decade was directed at international recognition of selected heritage properties and elements, it is now time to articulate messages and communicate values. And interpretation and education for enhancing integrated heritage approaches is clearly positioned at their core. Thank you.
Najlepša hvala Špeli Španžel za ta res temeljit oris izzivov v ohranjanju in upravljanju UNESCO-ve dediščine, ki ni samo pred nami, ampak je že zdaj vse okoli nas. So really many thanks to Špela Španžel for this exhaustive outline of the challenges in the field of the primarily, of course, UNESCO heritage, its preservation and management, but that of course extends beyond to heritage protection and management on different levels. And these are challenges that are not only ahead of us in the near future, but they're actually already all around us and need to be addressed. And if I may just underline already at this point, when the Dean was presenting the chair, it is among the key targets and starting points of our chair, exactly this bridging, but not only, I mean, in first place, of course, culture, nature, movable and immovable heritage, tangible and intangible, but also bridging or creating, taking heritage as the platform where an inclusive discourse on heritage takes place. So it goes much beyond and further from the old authoritative or authorized heritage discourse and gives voice to the different subaltern discourses, but of course within a professional framework and an inclusive approach. I stop here because considering our program, we planned at this point a short break for us here in person to just take a deeper breath, and also for all the colleagues following us online. We shall withdraw for 10 minutes and come back then again online with the third part of our event today, where two eminent professionals, experts in the field of museology and heritage interpretation and in the field of nature conservation will present their lectures. Thank you very much. Hvala lepa, ste bili z nami. Grazie per essere stati con noi. Okay. So, welcome back to our inauguration event of the UNESCO Chair on Education Interpretation for Enhancing Integrated Heritage Approaches. We are now starting the third and last part of today's event. For time restrictions and reasons, it will only be in English. And we are glad to have these two experts presenting lectures on the very topic that our UNESCO Chair deals with. As mentioned already before, let me just resume it again. So the newly established UNESCO Chair, the University of Primorskem in Slovenia, together with the Škocjan Case Park, is dedicated to promoting integrated approaches to heritage by converging views on cultural heritage conservation, nature conservation, by overcoming the divisions between tangible and intangible heritage, between movable and immovable heritage, and most of all by promoting inclusive heritage discourses in which the often silenced and unheard perceptions of heritage gain voice. A key tool for promoting such integrated approaches lies in developing educational activities related to the heritage field, as well as in communicating properly the values of heritage to the broader public and vice versa. This means by developing heritage interpretation. So, in our endeavors, we are joining forces with several experts in the related fields across Europe and over the globe. Over 30 institutions in Europe and globally expressed their support during our application for the chair. So we are honored to have as our guests today, even if only online, given the circumstances, two renowned experts who will shed light on our common topics and challenges. First, we shall listen to Mr. Günter Köck, senior researcher in the field of integrative biology and biodiversity at the Austrian Academy of Science and Austrian delegate at the UNESCO International Coordinating Council of the MAB, Man and Biosphere Program in Vienna, Austria. His lecture is dedicated to the role of science and research in the UNESCO Biosphere Reserves in Austria. Mr. Köck, are you with us? Inconvenience. Mr. Köck, the floor is yours. Thank you very much and welcome among us.
Thank you very much. Well, that's always a problem with those hybrid meetings. I know that because since the last 2 years we had so many meetings, which is really, sometimes problematic on the technical side. Just before I start, I just want to say that I'm sitting in my mother's house and the bandwidth of the internet connection is not very well, so if I get a warning on the screen, I might have to switch off my camera, but this shouldn't impact my presentation. And maybe a last sentence in the introduction, I think it was Matteo Rosati who mentioned that you have a wonderful weather in Cope. This is not the case here in Austria. It's really stormy, there's a little bit of sun, there's rain, so we have everything. I would like to join you in Cope, but I'm afraid I have to stay here. Okay. I will try to share my screen now. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, very well, thank you. Yes, very well, we can see you, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, my name is Günter Köck. I am from the Austrian Academy of Sciences, from the Austrian MAP program. I have to say first that I'm really honored to give a lecture on the occasion of this inauguration meeting of the UNESCO Chair. I'm the Secretary General of the Austrian MAP National Committee, which is responsible for the Austrian UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, and for this reason I would like to talk a little bit about science and research in our biosphere reserves. Here you can see the content of my presentation, which is not focused on heritage, but gives a more general overview on science and research and why it is good for biosphere reserves. At the beginning, I will give you a brief overview about the Austrian biosphere reserves. Then maybe I should explain what is a biosphere reserve. There might be participants in the audience which are not really familiar with the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve concept. Then I would like to explain from the National Committee's point of view why research in science is so important for biosphere reserves. Then we will talk a little bit about the connections between Austrian biosphere reserves and Austrian universities. And finally, I will present a best practice example from my point of view from an Austrian biosphere reserve. Well, Austria has currently 4 biosphere reserves. There's the Salztal in the province of Vorarlberg. Then the biosphere reserve Wienerwald, which is adjacent to the city of Vienna. The largest one is the biosphere reserve Salzburger Nordberge in Salzburger Luga in Kärntner Nordberge. And the smallest one, the biosphere reserve Unteres Murtal, which is, I would say, very new. Unteres Murtal is the newest and smallest biosphere reserve. It's situated on the Austrian-Slovenian border. which is since autumn 21 part of a really much bigger unit, namely the world's first biosphere reserve, consisting of 5 countries, which is Austria, Slovenia, Hungary, Croatia, and Serbia. So this is a really, I would say, sensational achievement, and also maybe a lighthouse project for the entire UNESCO. Well, what makes a region a biosphere reserve? Biosphere reserve are ecosystems which are recognized by UNESCO on the basis of uniform criteria. Where models of sustainable use of the biosphere are being developed and tested, and if possible implemented. And as so-called model regions, also learning sites for sustainable development, they serve not only to protect and maintain ecosystems, but also to carry out ecological research, environmentally well land use, education, and learning for sustainable development. Currently, the road network of Biosphere Reserve includes 27 Biosphere Reserve in 131 countries, including 22 transboundary sites. One of them is the new 5 countries Biosphere Reserve along the Mura-Drava-Danube corridor. Well, the expectations what the Biosphere Reserve should deliver are manifold, and they are also really ambitious. Based on the 3 main functions, as you can see in the background here, conservation, development, and logistics, Biosphere Reserve should preserve biological diversity, they should protect natural resources, they should promote sustainable regional development, and they should also serve as sites of research, education, learning, and also public awareness raising. And all these functions should be carried out in participation, what means by involving as many partners from the region as possible, including also the local communities. To fulfill these functions, biosphere reserves are divided into 3 zones, namely the core area, the buffer zone, and the transition area. The names are sometimes different from country to country, but these are what you can read here, these are the official names from UNESCO. And these zones help the Biosphere Reserve to fulfill its main functions. So if you come to the core area, that's a classic nature conservation zone. Then the transition area, which is usually by far the largest zone of the Biosphere Reserve. This is the living and economic space for the population. This is the area where the population lives from, and this is where the new ideas, the new models for sustainable developments are implemented. And in between the core and the transition zone, as a buffer, as the name says, there is the buffer zone, which surrounds or adjoins the core area, and this is used for human activities which are compatible with ecological practices, and this is also the place where research, monitoring, training, education, and all those logistic activities are carried out. If you come back to the 3 main functions, to make a Biosphere Reserve fully functional, it is definitely necessary to integrate these 3 functions, conservation, development, and logistics, in an effective way. And from the national committees, from the Austrian national committees point of view, the best instrument for doing this is definitely science and research. If you want to do this, if you want to undertake scientific activities in a Biosphere Reserve, it's definitely necessary to connect the scientific community with the Biosphere Reserve managed and with the people living in the Biosphere Reserve. But how to do this? We try in Austria to implement all of those things which are shown in that list. It's really important that we have to show and also promote that the Biosphere Reserves are really valuable research sites for universities and to explain to people. We have to explain why research is important for the biosphere reserve, and we have to explain them why the biosphere reserve and the people living in the biosphere reserve benefit from research and benefit from science. Of course, we have also to provide, as the National Committee, an adequate research infrastructure in the biosphere reserve, which means accommodation for the researchers, accommodation for students, and also some working facilities and some other logistic points. Well, all these points sound almost self-evident, but they are not really easy to achieve. And thus I would like to show how we try to fulfill that in Austria. I would say proudly I can say that the involvement of Austrian research institutions in Austrian Biosphere Reserve are really strong, and there are three reasons for that. And for me the main reason is that the Austrian MAP Committee has its own research budget. This is it's maybe the only one MAP National Committee with an own research budget, and this of course enables us not only to identify research gaps, but we can fill these research gaps with appropriate projects. What we also do is we are funding research projects in and for Austrian biosphere reserves. We also foster cooperation with biosphere reserves and biosphere reserve projects in other countries, for instance, in Spain, in Peru, in Greece, and Bhutan, and many other countries. And so we have spent, since the last 15 years, I think this number is not really correct, so I would say it's now about 4 billion euros, which have been invested by the Austrian MAP Committee into research projects in biosphere reserves. The second reason is that the cooperation and information exchange between the biosphere reserves, the MAP Committee, and the research community is really good. So all the biosphere representatives are invited to the National Committee meetings. One meeting is carried out in the biosphere reserve, so this means that we are much closer to the biosphere reserve community than in many other countries. All the projects are carried out with Austrian and also sometimes foreign research institutions, and also the project reports are reviewed by the MAP Committee, so we know very well what's going on in the Austrian biosphere reserves. And the third reason for me is that we promote the scientific work which is carried out in biosphere reserves, and from my point of view, this is really important that people should know that research is important for the biosphere reserve, and that the people living in the biosphere reserve benefit from the scientific work done in their region. And how we promote this, we have an own MAP website, you can visit it, it's www.biosphereparks. We say, in Austria, we say biosphere parks and not biosphere reserves, where we publish the latest news, and we also have a MAP Facebook page where we promote the research work done in the biosphere reserves. Now I would like to show you the connections between Austrian biosphere reserves and universities in Austria. And the first thing I can say is that Austrian universities are very present in Austrian biosphere reserves, simply because the number of the many research projects funded by the MAP Committee, and also other European Union projects like Interreg, LIFE, and so on. So there's permanent research going on in our biosphere reserves, but there are also more formal connections between the university and the biosphere reserves. The Process Walsertal is, for instance, a really formal cooperation agreement with the University of Innsbruck, which was established in 2017. The Wienerwald Biosphere Reserve is working on the same system. There's a strong wish to establish a cooperation with OCU Jena, the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, but it's not yet established. There's a simple reason which is called Corona. So cooperation agreement will be established very soonly. The Biosphere Reserve Unteres Murtal, there is a cooperation agreement with Styrian universities envisaged, but the Biosphere Reserve was recognized in June 2019, so there was not that much time to establish a formal agreement. But due to many European Union projects taking place in that area and further downstream, the Mura, the Danube corridor, there are many universities working in the area, so the area is very familiar with research, and I'm also confident that we will have a cooperation agreement between Styrian universities and the Biosphere Reserves on the ground very soon. The Nockberg part is special. As you may know, the Biosphere Reserve Salzburger Lungau and Kärntner Nockberge consists of two federal provinces. The northern part, the Lungau part, is in the federal province of Salzburg. The Nockberger region is in the southern part in Carinthia, and they really have a very special science project, which is called Science Link. And this is what I would like to show you in brief, because from my point of view, this is really a best practice example which should be shown in a little bit more detail. It's a research cooperation between the management of the Nockberge part, the University of Klagenfurt and the University of Applied Sciences. It's called Science Link. And it was established in 2013. It's a really long term and grounded by a compact collaboration between the three partners. The mission is to build bridges between national and international research and, let's say, the living reality in the Biosphere Reserve region. And this, as you can see later, it's definitely an excellent scientific support for the Biosphere Reserve management. The project has quite a few tasks and policy. There are thematic courses at the university. There are many courses to many topics like protected areas in the Alps and the attractive regions, and also sustainable development. There are many public relation activities going on. There are weekend workshops for students in the Biosphere Reserve and also at the universities. There are get-together days where the students and also the people living in the Biosphere Reserve can visit the university and can ask and are informed about which kind of research is going on at the university in their region. There are also press releases and so on. There's also a literature database, the so-called Notothek, where all the scientific work done is collected and people in the Biosphere Reserve and also the students and the scientific community can use all the research, scientific literature which is carried out in those projects can be found there. And from my point of view, the most important point is the last one. It's this research exchange platform called Forschungsbörse. This is really something special. It's a contact point for master thesis and dissertations in nearly all lines of research. The students are really fully supported by the scientific community at the two universities and also by the Biosphere Reserve management, with contacts in the area, with literature research, with research facilities in the area, which accommodation is in the area. And the last point, which is for me the essential point, is that the research exchange platform offers a catalog of more than 50 research or in German language this would be called a Fragenkatalog. And this is, as I said, really essential, simply because the research questions have been formulated by the Biosphere Reserve management in order to fill the knowledge gaps they have identified in their Biosphere Reserve. So practices and anticipations. So from my point of view, that's a real best practice example which can be, which is definitely something which could be done also by other countries, by other institutions. Maybe the new UNESCO Chair wants to connect with the Notberg management to receive more information in detail, because this is really something special that the management of a protected area, let's say more general, defines research questions which are then dissolved by the university. So this is really a big support for the management of a protected area. Well, I'm now at the end of my presentation. I hope it was interesting for you. Please let me finish with the warmest congratulations and best wishes for the future to Ireno Lazar and your team. I am convinced that already in the near future, scientific cooperation activities between the new UNESCO Chair and Austrian universities and also biology research in the field of heritage will be established. And I'm really confident, maybe there's also a chance that I can personally work with you. Many thanks for your attention and quality.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook. Really for your synthetic yet very, very insightful presentation, especially because it very clearly pinpoints what is the role of research and science in promoting and developing heritage management. And just as well, because it very neatly emphasized how this links to the educational system and how students can be integrated into the professional world. It is now time for our next invited lecturer, and it is a pleasure and honor to have, as lecturer said, Mr. Darko Babić, who is a renowned international specialist for museology. He is a lecturer at the University of Zagreb in Croatia, as well as president of the Croatian International Committee for the Training and Personnel at ICOM, the International Council of Museums. And he will give a lecture with the title, Through Understanding Appreciation, Through Appreciation Literacy, by quoting a very famous expert that all of us in the field know quite well. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Can you hear me? That's the first question.
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Okay, and you can see my slide. I see that on your screen on your part. Okay, I'm really honored to be part of this inauguration meeting of UNESCO Chair. I must say, with the University of Primorskem, I think I started to cooperate 10 years ago. Maybe it was 9, but still, let's say 10 sounds better. But it's quite a long time for now, and I'm really happy that even in this very special occasion, I could share some of my opinion, some of theoretical part, more than anything else, but about many things which we and other speakers already mentioned up today before me. So as you said, I'm coming from University of Zagreb, from Sub-Department of Museology and Heritage Management, quite a lot involved in ICOM, as well as involved in ICOMOS, especially the International Committee for Interpretation and Presentation. So what is my intention to do today is, as you said, it is not actually the quote. My title is not the quote. My title is playing with a quote of Tilden, which I will mention later. But again here, to provoke and inspire, or to give some reminder which always are needed to be present when we are speaking about heritage. So about heritage itself, about heritage interpretation, and idea about heritage literacy, and something about in between about possible futures. The image you see is something which is called museum fatigue in professional discourse, and something which actually we do not want to have, no matter are we speaking about museum per se, or are we speaking about any heritage interpretation, any heritage location. Short idea about the sub-department of Museology. It was established in 1984. No matter, some lectures started in 1946, actually, at University of Zagreb regarding the museum studies of related things. I do participate in bachelor program, which is in our case Department of Program of Information and Communication Sciences, and we have our own master in Museology and Heritage Management from 2006 after the so-called Bologna reform, and average 25 master students per year which do attend that master. One of the maybe most famous moments for those who are indeed in museology was when indeed famous Professor Peter Vermeersch, who worked at the Rhineland Academy in Holland, now retired, defended his PhD thesis towards the methodology of museology in 1992 at our sub-department. So what is the context? What is the world we live in? Why is that interesting regarding heritage? We need to be aware of overarching social context, which is, if we put in 10 small steps, is indeed we are looking for, or people are looking for, authentic experience. People are looking for content rich. They won't have, and they actually are used to have huge amount of content which we, when we are speaking about heritage, do have obligation to deliver too. We are speaking about audience development and of course participative involvement, which is not anymore kind of avant-garde or something like that. This is actually reality. This is what is demanded today. You cannot do without that. We are speaking about the importance of local and regional level. No matter we are becoming more and more global, just because we are becoming more and more global, and it will not stop, focus on local and regional is becoming more and more important. New media and technology is something which is not any new, but it's still something which is developing so fast. So every day almost we have new media and technology which are coming into our life. We're speaking about human voice, which was somehow lost in the last decades. Well, it was never lost completely, but insisting on coming back to the human voice is something which is important. We're speaking about public versus private spaces, so that, well, is it combination, or is it kind of the war between public and private spaces? It's not so maybe critically important, but there is some kind of contents in between, and some kind of dilemma, and some kind of our, of course, in favor of or arguing for public spaces. We're speaking about tourism, regeneration, revitalization, which is, as you know, and maybe not in the last year and a half or 2 years, but tourism is indeed the first economy, the strongest part of the economy all around the world. Again, as said before, no matter of insisting of local and regional, global and international perspectives cannot be avoided today. We cannot say, no, we are isolated part, we are not part of something which is going on around us, not only around us in Europe, if we are speaking about Europe, but indeed around us, if we count on New Zealand too, or Argentina too, or any other part of the world. And of course, what was mentioned today and makes sense about sustainability and climate changes, which is indeed something which is in focus and must stay in focus and must remain in focus, looking at today and looking at the future. So how in that dynamic of the world, how we do understand the heritage around us, how we think about heritage, and actually the need for what I'm saying or arguing, that we need a critical look at the way how we, as professional, as heritage experts, but as well as users or consumers of what is connected to the heritage, how we in all that create and participate, how we create and participate in the third, what we call try to explain that a little bit more, we would say that heritage is usually perceived almost like a self-explanatory term. This statement is especially valid for many of us, much more than what I call before users, audience, or consumers. And this is not very surprisingly, since the professional has been initiated, educated in many fields, many professions which are connected with a heritage over a considerable amount of time. So it's somehow expected at the end we accept the established norms and the rules and to adapt to that paradigm which exists. And here to act in specific, as Laura Jen Smith called it, authorized heritage discourse, which was mentioned today too. But what is, again, reality of the globalized world? What is just trying to give some explanation, so not explanation, some situation. You can easily recognize, of course, what is on images on this slide. On the first one is Egypt, Giza. On the second one is Las Vegas in US. So what the number is saying is that 6 million, and that was long ago before even Arab Spring, visitors do visit Giza in Egypt, like at the same time 25 million people visit Las Vegas in US. Okay, people do have reason to go to Las Vegas for different reasons. But what is interesting for us, or supposed to be interesting for us as heritage professionals, that many of those 35 million people visiting Las Vegas do have opinion that when they visit some parts of Las Vegas, they actually visit what is quite similar to something which exists in Egypt, and that there is no reason, there is no special reason to go to Egypt, because you can do that in Las Vegas. And this is something which we cannot blame people for that. We just need to be aware of that. Whatever we do, whatever we plan, whatever is our act as a heritage professional, we must have that in our head. The next example, which I quite often use, maybe some of you already know that, and this is the Casa Vila from Barcelona, one of iconic heritage location in Barcelona. And what I usually do when I'm showing this slide, I'm asking the audience to tell me what is the most visited, the most attractive location, place, heritage attraction in the city of Barcelona. And some people will say Casa Emilia, Sagrada Familia, Museo Picasso, or Casa Vila, which is on your image. But in fact, by far the most visited place and the most visited museum in the city of Barcelona is the Museum of the Football Club Barcelona. And again, nothing wrong with that. If you ask me, even more, there is something which we call participation, or something which you can do there, and it's indeed in live participation of events which is going on, which is nothing more than a football match. But again, people do recognize, I'm speaking about the Spanish people do recognize Museum of the Football Club of Barcelona as the most important place to visit when they are in Barcelona. And this is again important for us to be aware of when we are doing different kinds of action we are planning to do regarding the audience. So if we come to the intention or try to offer some definition of heritage, we could say that heritage is a collective cultural capital of community, which is alive and constantly changing or being created, which is a very important part. By the words of the French museologist who actually who was involved in creating of the very first eco-museum in France at the beginning of 1970s, it consists of more than three-dimensional objects. The people are responsible for the museum, because it was referring to eco-museum for the most, use this capital for activities that are part of the cultural dimension of the development of the Roger Smith, which I mentioned as part of the idea of vodjo as heritage discourse, is saying what makes things valuable and meaningful, what makes them heritage, or what makes the collection of the rocks in a field Stonehenge, are the present-day cultural processes and activities that are undertaken at and around them, and of which they become part. So she actually is putting the point of that management process, which is not necessarily the classical understanding of management, but interaction which is going on, and interaction for which we humans are responsible. Of course, not going into the deep of that other layers which are necessary as today is or must be inclusive, interdisciplinary, or vocal, truly most immaterial, because some material, not some, but all material objects do have its immaterial side, must be participatory and must be sustainable. If we try to look at some other definitions which are leading us to something which is in focus of the established UNESCO Chair, we could say that heritage is that part of the past which we select in the present, which is important for contemporary purposes, which is even more important. So it's selected today, practically every second, for contemporary purposes. Whether those are economic or cultural or political or any other factors or layers which do have influence on that. Or heritage is heritage because it's subjected to the management and preservation, conservation processes, not because it simply is, it simply exists, which lead us to the main idea that interpretation actually is indeed all. And we are coming here to something which was in practice, as a practice of UNESCO Venice office explained through the action which UNESCO already done of heritage interpretation. And what I'm offering here is several definitions of heritage interpretation. One is from very famous, of course, American writer Freeman Tilden from 1957, saying heritage interpretation is an educational activity which aims to reveal meanings and relationships through the use of original objects by first-hand experience and by illustrative media rather than simply to communicate factual information. Or the one from the National Association from Interpretation, this is the National Association from USA, the recent one. The heritage interpretation is a purposeful approach to communication that facilitates meaningful, relevant, and inclusive experience that deepen understanding, broaden perspectives, and inspire engagement with the world around us. So both of them, what is, of course, core of interpretation, to put that focus of interaction of us with the world around us, no matter are those part of that world are, a museum object and a permanent exhibition, or indeed biosphere reserve, national parks, and locations like that. And coming to the 6 principles of interpretation by Freeman Tilden, which was, again, Freeman Tilden delivered them in 1957, so quite a long time, but they are still valid. Not only valid, but they are perfect reminder what we actually supposed to have in our heads all the time. I would say it did all the time. We are doing something with heritage as far as heritage communication as a wider term is involved. So the very first part is saying any interpretation that does not somehow relate what is being displayed or described to something within the personality or experience of the visitor will be sterile. So if there is no connection in between the experience of us as a visitor with display, then if there is not any connection, there is no use to do it. There is no use of that. The second one, information as such is not interpretation. to be aware all the time. The third one, interpretation, is an art, which combines many arts, whether the material presented are scientific, historical, or architectural. Any art is to some degree fictional. The fourth one, the chief aim of interpretation is not instruction but provocation. And as the first one, the second one, this fourth one is extremely important because still looks like quite often, too often to be precise, that we are actually delivering, displaying something to the audience. We are actually want to learn that something. But idea is not to learn that. Idea is to provoking audience some kind of spark, some kind of interest, which will actually start their interest for the topic we are presenting. The fifth, interpretation should aim to present the whole rather than the part, and must address itself to the whole matter rather than any phase. This is indeed, if you look at the fifth principle, this is something which today we will call holistic approach. What is? So again, in 1957, Raymond Gilden recognized, he didn't use the word holistic, but he recognized holistic approach. The sixth, interpretation addressed to children, say up to the age of 12, should not be illusion of the presentation to adults, but should follow a fundamentally different approach. To react, it's best, it will require a simple program. This is again something which is recognized today that there is no global audience, there is no overall audience. So, Gilden is just mentioning children, but maybe you are aware that segmentation of the market, segmentation of the audience is well developed and needs to be aware. And by all that we are doing, of course, not to have that museum fatigue at the beginning, but to have this kind of reaction, no matter again, in museums, at archaeological or any other heritage site. So what is the role? What is the role of the expert? As a heritage expert, I think we must act as kind of mediators in the process of bringing source, so on one side, and audience users on another side closer together, which would be one of the possible definition of heritage interpretation too. So we are in between and we are connecting that. And when we are discussing about this, when we are discussing about heritage interpretation, when we are discussing about popularization and so on, what they are asking is, but what about conservation? You are not mentioning conservation. Conservation is most important part, and so on. I do agree. That's one of the critical parts of our work. And here is the famous definition, which is associated to a Primorskem Gilden, but actually was not his wording, but he popularized the wording, which is saying, through interpretation, we could reach understanding of audience. Through understanding, we will reach appreciation. And finally, through appreciation, we will reach protection. And this kind of protection is not protection which we as heritage experts are doing, but this is protection which is actually, or by interpretation, that protection will become part of the communities, of the people in community, and that's what we want to achieve. We could say that interpretation is, in that way, kind of storytelling conservation, which could be done as a theater, as TV documentary, or you can use any other term to connect that. Why I say TV documentary? Because personally, I adore BBC documentary, any kind of documentary, and this is indeed way of touching you or reaching you, no matter if topic is intrinsically interesting for you or not. What is happening to me, whatever kind of BBC documentary I've we must, as I said, act as mediators in the process of bringing source and users closer together, but with objective to develop skills in individuals or community, which will encourage that people and ensure their full understanding of heritage, including, and that's important, its creation. So it's not, again, just explaining, it's connecting, but connecting including how actually heritage is created. Whereas the ideal, which would be literacy in my way of thinking, is the state in which they, people, would competently interpret and manage their own heritage. And by that, contributing to the creation of a new additional values and an improving of the quality of their own life and what is important according to their own preference. So what is that? If aforementioned literacy, using here adopted definition from Center for Literacy of Quebec, literacy could be explained as a complex set of abilities which is needed to understand and use dominant in different cultural dominant symbol system or systems of culture, no matter it's alphabet, numbers, visual icons or something else, for personal and community development. Where the nature of these abilities and the demand for them vary from one context to another. So it is not the same all around the globe. It is not the same even in the same country. In that sense, as literacy as a complex set of abilities needed to understand and use the symbol systems of the culture, heritage literacy as a kind of new term could be part of what indeed human rights, which aim is to grant the right to each community to have its own definition of heritage, which is in a way part of invention, but not completely in a way maybe as I see. Heritage literacy is a specific methodology of heritage management, community-based, a process of sharing awareness for production of meanings and managing that meanings. Or in other words, the heritage literacy means enabling communities to shape and use heritage in a suitable way and according to their own needs. And in that sense, heritage literacy, of course, will be spread around the globe, but it will not be the same in US, in Egypt, in Australia, and in Japan, which actually show, this slide actually show that, so with kind of different kind of workshop, different kind of educational activities, different kind of promoting of idea of not only heritage, but one's heritage, including heritage interpretation, and all other related parts, no matter is it Croatia on the right side, Fiji, or Borneo on down here, we could reach or could do a small step toward the heritage literacy. And that leads us to a before mentioned heritage management as an important part, because as I'll explain, what is going on, what is critical in a way for an understanding of heritage is that management. So doing something, if we are not doing something, the heritage will more or less disappear, especially that what we call cultural heritage. So in that sense, heritage management is a multidisciplinary branch that, if properly understood, goes beyond duration to reduce solely to the protection or direct economic viability of heritage. Contemporary understanding of it implies respect for all socially relevant factors in a given context, and consequently ensuring tangible benefits by which heritage management contributes to the development of primary, of course, the local community, which do own the heritage, but also society as a whole. Up to date, heritage studies, especially with their critical heritage approach, point to the complexity today means indeed socially responsible knowledge management. And that's all from my side. I hope that no matter it was stream of questions in a way that you read some of the core idea which I wanted to share with you, and giving any possible hopes or inspiration for activities of UNESCO Chair. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Darko Babic, for this really inspiring and overarching lecture, which actually I think my colleagues from our team of the chair will agree, basically framed the theory, the theoretical background and the reflections on heritage, which actually are the basis, the departing point of all the work within our chair. So theories within the heritage studies, we are especially found also of the critical heritage studies perspective. It was great to hear pinpointing the issue of definition of what heritage is, stating that we are not talking about merely about artifacts, but in first place about processes of evaluation, of selection, which in first place should be done by or at least with the community where the heritage lies. The second point, I think, in your lecture goes straight to what the core of our chair is on one hand, the reflection of what the role of the professionals is, and especially that by talking about interpretation, we are talking about developing professionals who work as mediators. And this is a word that keeps returning in our program. It was a highlight in our application, but it is an objective where we want to reach with the activities of our chair. So thanks again for these two really inspiring lectures, and to both our colleagues who are, of course, members of the supporting institutions who accompanied the birth of this UNESCO chair. So to finally conclude the inauguration event of today, I would like to briefly present a selection, in this case really, of key points of the work program of the UNESCO Chair for the year 2022. The years to come, of course, the program will be evolving. While waiting for the PowerPoint to be turned on, I would just like to stress that the whole work within the UNESCO Chair at the Faculty of Humanities of the University of Primorska relies, or actually is based on is based on two key milestones of the work at the faculty. On the one hand, this is research in the field of heritage that we approach in a very interdisciplinary way. On the other hand is the educational programs on all the three levels of the Bologna system. So the first level courses that deal with cultural heritage and heritage as such. The second level, with different courses that deal with heritage, especially heritage tourism, and then doctoral programs that some of them are really directly oriented to these topics, to the topic of heritage management. So that's one branch where our work is situated and from where we are developing it on, and the other, as said, is research. And there is a third intersection of the two, and this is the applicative part of our research work and educational work that is takes form in the shape of three key elements. One is the International Summer School of Museology that has been organized by our university for the last 15 years, with the sad exclusion of the last epidemic period. Second is the archaeological park of the Roman villa situated in Isola, in the city nearby. where we are developing new forms of trainings and heritage management. And thirdly, the freshest and newest and highly innovative mythical park developed together by the University of Primorska and the municipality of Kozina on the karstic border. I just wanted to stress these pillars because they keep coming back and are the departing point of all our program. And so now, just briefly, first I would just show you this. Well, for those who are following online, can see can actually read it. Those here with us in person would need an amplifying lens. In any case, the point is that within the application, we proposed a set of activities that would keep recurring for the 4 years of the chair, and aside, so they focus on one hand on the research, and the other center focus is on training of different profiles that exactly work as mediators. That's exactly what Darko Babic just stressed. And these are, in first place, educators, so people working in the educational system, people working in the tourism sector, and of course professionals in the field of heritage. And besides them, of course, constant work and workshops with the local communities of selected case studies on national, regional, and global scale. So this is just a kind of site map, and I will immediately jump. So the first, of course, part of the program was today's opening. We are starting immediately next week with guest lectures within our second level. So the master courses dealing with anthropology will, so led by Dr. Katja Hrobat-Virloge, will be hosting Dr. Katrin Paps from the ICOM Norway, who will be giving a set of lectures. Two will be also online, and will be dealing with issues on museology and presenting difficult history, exactly addressing issues of inclusive discourses in heritage. Then, throughout the year and immediately in late spring, we will start with workshops with educators. On the one hand, some of these activities will be run directly by the Faculty of Humanities and will be also combined in person and online. Part of them will do our best to organize, and so to be reachable also to the English-speaking public. And then an important part of the program relies in our collaboration with our partners, so the Škocjan Cave Parks, who has been coordinating the international network of schools, particularly, of course, the National Slovene section, and with this framework, again, organize workshops and activities focusing on heritage interpretation. Then come the workshops particularly addressing the transmission or taking into the integration of traditional know-how within the communities and the integration of these in the heritage management in the Karst region, again on the case study of the Škocjan Caves Park. With this framework, we are very glad to have with us and the faculty as our co-worker Dr. Giulia Beltrametti, the winner of Marie Curie project that deals exactly with the management of historical landscapes. And I think this framework offers us also possibilities to develop further activities that Mr. Matteo Rosati was mentioning earlier in terms of interpretative planning. Then a particular section is devoted to workshops on participatory approaches in the built heritage conservation, where approaches that would include the perspective of the community, not solely of the owners, in the procedures of defining conservation plans and further management plans is being studied, and is being studied in a participatory way itself, so working with the communities on selected case studies. Again, again, we are departing from the Slovenian framework, but we will extend and share the insights from these workshops on an international, again, combined online and in-person workshop conference together with the Science and Research Center from Ljubljana in September, where we will be hosting one of the most renowned anthropologists of place, Dr. Seta Low. And then comes at the 7th place, but actually, as said earlier, it stands at the 1st place of the activities within our chair, is the International Summer School of Museology, that this year, slightly differently than in the previous ones, will take place in September. Usually we organize it in June, and it has been addressing since its establishment the international public and hosted international experts, so that I dare to say that we now have an international community members of our Summer School of Museology, and this year will finally take place again in person again in September in Koper. Then this year has been proclaimed by the UN as the International Year of Glass, and in that sense, since our dean and the head of our chair is a visible member of the international different associations and committees at ICOM, dealing with glass and historical glass, we will be participating in this ceremonial program with workshops related, tackling again heritage interpretation in relation to historical glass, and organizing an international conference. And last but not least, and as said, this is just a selection of activities. There will be more, but these are, let's say, the highlights. Again, in September, there is the, by now, traditional European Researchers' Night at the end of September, where some workshops, again, activities addressing primarily the professionals in the field of heritage, but also the broader public, will be organized at the Archaeological Park in San Simone in Isola, which our faculty is managing. And at the same time, there will be a workshop on storytelling taking place in the mythical park in Rudik on the Kars, so here nearby. The park I was mentioning earlier that represents an innovative case of preserving and managing the intangible landscape. And with this, I leave you with this teaser, what intangible landscape is and how we manage it. And I invite you to follow on our websites and the social media contacts, our programs, so the program, the announcements, and to join wherever possible our activities. And with this, I would like to thank everyone for your attention, our guests, the excellencies that visited us today, that participated, the professionals in the policy-making field, but actually professionals in the heritage field, and as, of course, our two guest lecturers that join us online. I would like to thank all the participants that followed us online, and all the collaborators that supported the establishment of this chair. Perhaps just one last word of goodbye by our chair, Professor Ireno Lazar. Thank you, everyone.
Hvala lepa, Neža. Thank you very much. I will just repeat again what Neža already said. Thank you very much to our guests, to our speakers, to our dear colleagues who we are collaborating now for many years. But at the end, of course, thank you very much to my colleagues, workers within our UNESCO Chair. First of all, Neža, who was today the main working part of the event, but also to Zrinka, to Katja, to Vanya, to Alenka, and of course to our team for media promotion and technical support that we managed, and we did it, and we do hope that our next meeting will be live and we will be able to join and to see each other in person. Thank you very much to all of you, and till the next time. Hvala lepa in nasvidenje.